Hey guys, Jonathan Ingram here. In this tutorial we are going to learn all about dialogues in Android Studio. So these are the ones that we are going to go over. First we have just your standard dialogue with a title and a message. And then we will move on to dialogues with buttons. We have 3 different buttons that you can choose from and the built-in standard dialogues. Then we will show a dialog with a list, and you can select things on the list, and right now a couple of the items just display a toast. I believe the first one goes to another activity. And then I'll show you a custom dialog where you can make your own custom layout. And this, okay, let's see if I just put in Jonathan and super secret password, you'll see that it displays a toast with that username and password. And then finally we will look at a multiple choice dialog that involves checkboxes. So let's go ahead and get to the code. So all of this is done in the main activity. I've had to set up a few buttons. Each of these activate the different dialogues that we have. So we have a standard dialog, button dialog, list dialog, custom, and multiple choice dialog. I went ahead and configured our edit text username and password for that one custom dialog, and I created an alert dialog variable and assigned it to null. My layout for the main activity is just a few buttons lined up. I believe this is also a relative layout. Yep. And we have everything set up there. For my colors, this is just kind of these color scheme that I'm going with at the moment. And if you need help picking out colors for your themes, I will link a website that I use in the description below. It's a material color palette that's helped me out a ton. And also I created an arrays.xml file, and I added these 2 arrays to that file. We're going to use those in the Java code. So if I go back to my main activity, I hook up my buttons and I set up on-click listeners for each button, and all they do is they call a method for depending on which dialog I have set for that button. So let's start off with the standard dialog. So to create a basic dialog, just to show your user some sort of extra information, first you'll want to create an alert dialog builder. So I have that set up right here, alert dialog.builder. I just called it builder equals alert dialog.builder, and then pass in main activity.this or whatever your class name is. Otherwise you will get some context issues. I had to experiment with that. And then you set a message and title on the builder. So builder.setMessage and you can chain .setTitle to that, and that is just what you see here, dialog title. This is my dialog message. And then to show that dialog, create an alert dialog called dialog and equals builder.create. That will create the dialog for you, and then you just call dialog.show, and that will display the dialog, and the user can click on the back button or click anywhere outside of the dialog to dismiss it. So that is what a basic, just standard nothing fancy kind of dialog looks like. Next, let's move on to dialog with buttons. Let's see. So this one is set up in a similar fashion. You create your builder, and then you set your message and your title. And then this is where you set your buttons. There are 3 different buttons that you can use with the built-in dialogues. There's a positive button, a negative button, and a neutral button. And this is where you can set, you can basically call builder dot and then set positive button for your positive. You give it a text value, and then let me expand that. And then you pass in new dialog interface dot on click listener, and this creates a click listener for that button. And then in this case I just have it displaying a toast. And you do the same for your negative button, which in this case is my cancel button. And then I just show you the neutral button. The neutral button was that one. It's off to the left here. So that is a dialog with custom buttons. And again, you just create your dialog and pass in your builder.create and then dialog show. A note on buttons though, you can only have one of each. So you can only have one positive, one negative, one neutral button. You are not allowed to have 2 positive buttons or 2 neutral buttons, or 2 negative buttons for that matter, in this built-in fashion here. Alright, next is the custom dialog, and this is where you can create your own layouts, and I'll show you what that dialog layout looks like. I just created an XML file called dialog username and password, and you don't worry about your buttons on the dialog in this case in my design here. So I just created a text view and then 2 edit text, username and password. And when I do custom dialogs, when I'm naming the IDs, I start mine off with DIA for dialog, and then sort of the name of what this dialog is, and then the type, in this case ET for edit text, and then I give it an actual name for that element. You'll see that kind of naming scheme a lot in my tutorials. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Now in this custom dialog, there are a couple things that are the same, and there's a few differences. I go ahead and create my builder and pass in my activity, and then I add the positive and negative button, and I had to set up the username and password edit text up above here for a particular reason. I was having some context type issues because I wanted to instantiate all of these within the button, but I was having some difficulties, so this has been my workaround. So I hook up the edit text to the UI, but when you're doing a custom dialog, instead of just calling find view by ID, you must call dialog.findView by ID, and then you pass in your ID. Otherwise you're going to get null pointer references. And then I have it set to just display a toast, and then grabbing the text of whatever I put in the username and password fields. And in the negative button, I just call dialog.cancel to close out the button. So that sets up the action buttons for that dialog. Next, I create a layout inflator and just named it inflator, and then you call this.getLayoutInflator. This inflator sets up the custom UI for your dialog, and you do that by calling in builder.setView inflator.inflate, and then that's where you pass in your custom layout, and then I just put null in the second value here. It says a void passing null as a view root, but in this case, yeah, that's just fine. And then I just call dialog equals builder.create and then dialog.show to view that dialog. And again, that is this one right here. Alright, so for our last dialog is set up to be a multiple choice dialog, and I'm pretending that I have like a pizza app. So I set my dialog title to select your toppings, and then I was playing around with arrays and also using some code from a website that I'll also link in the description. It's actually this page here. This is the documentation on the Dialog APIs, and I used a lot of their code examples here and also just kind of tweaked them. So that is where you might catch some of these comments that I forgot to delete. So what I'm doing in my checkbox dialog is I have it set to listen for when an item is checked, and I almost forgot to tell you, to create your choices you have to call set multiple choice items, and this is where I passed in my array that was in the arrays.xml file. And then I have a switch case statement, so if I select the first one, I just display a toast of what you have selected. So in this case it'll say cheese. If I select another one, it'll say pineapples, etc. And I click OK. I just display a toast, pretending that the items have been added to an order. And if I scroll down a little bit, you can see this is where we set up our buttons like we normally would, and that is where I display the toast message. Keep in mind I'm calling get application context in these areas here. And then just like all your other dialogs, you'll set up a dialog and pass builder.create to it, and then you'll call dialog.show. So that is the basic overview of a lot of the different dialog types that you can use in an Android application. I hope this video was helpful for you. This type of tutorial is more of a slower pace than my 5-minute video series. There's just a lot to cover on this particular section, and I did not want to try to compress it down to 5 minutes. So you'll see several other videos of this pace. This is actually just the first one in the pipeline. And if there are any other tutorials you would like to see, let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for your time.